and welcome to StratNews Global. You're on Talking Point, and with me is our editor Surya Gangadharan. Our guest today is Dr. Arvind Virmani, renowned economist and, of course, analyst on international affairs and economy. Dr. Virmani, thank you very much for your time. It's been almost 15 days into the lockdown. I don't know how you must have spent the time being very busy in writing, but what's your assessment of this first 15 days? What is the impact of the lockdown?
So, the question is, why was the lockdown needed? I think the main reason was that a lot of people were not taking the matter seriously. And in this, I refer to basically, you will recall the stories of Indians returning from abroad who were not taking care, were traveling on airplanes and going around without self quarantine. So the voluntary measures which had been suggested by the government were not working. So I think the main purpose or one of the objectives was to kind of shock people into taking the whole matter seriously. And of course, we've all read about the Tablighi Jamaat, but I just heard of a case today in which the son of the family returned from London and was with the family. They did not self quarantine in any way, and they are all seriously sick today. So I think the lockdown in that sense had a very useful effect. But in my view, I think we should use this time to think of and propagate alternative methods. Because the lockdown has many other serious implications which we can discuss. But I think the lockdown has worked to a certain extent to slow down the spread of infection.
Okay, so what next? I mean, since you're studying and you're actually writing about it, you're also helping, I think, the authorities in looking at alternative models of what can be done next. Can you share your assessment of what should be the next steps that the government must take?
So there are two, when we think of a lockdown, often people in the past, now they are beginning to come around to what I have been saying. The question is not lockdown or no lockdown. It is what is the intermediate solution in between these two extremes. And the reason why we come to this position is because lockdown is extremely costly. I and my co-worker have estimated the effects that the effect of the lockdown, which has already happened, is minus 2.8% of GDP. And if this continues, sorry?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So if this continues till the end of the month, the cost will go up to 5% of full year GDP. And if it is extended a further 1 month, it will go up to 9% of GDP. So a lockdown, we must remember, is extremely costly. So are there alternatives to how to slow down the spread of the virus, which is obviously very essential, alternatives to lockdown? So what I have thought about and written in the recent period is what is that alternative? And we can discuss some of the details of it.
Sir, have you, since you deal with the government, are you getting a sense from them as to what is their reading of the lockdown in terms of the coronavirus, the impact it's having on infections? What is the sense you're getting from them?
So I have no direct nobody from the government seeks my advice, though I do have my information sources and others who try to keep me in touch informally. I think the basic the decision, I think, was driven, on one side were the doctors and the medical people like the ICMR, etc., which were really thinking only about the medical effects and the problems they were seeing internationally and how difficult the hospital systems of those countries were found it to deal with it. So they were rightly very worried about how their performance would come up in this. So they were weighing only the effects of the medical part of it. On the other side, to some extent, I guess the economists perhaps were cautioning a little bit, how much I don't know, on the cost of such a lockdown. So I think on balance, the government decided that the medical factors were more important, at least for this 3-week period. So this is basically, and I think, as I said, I have been writing a lot about it and talking about it, and social media tweeting about it, because I don't think the precise costs, which some of them which I have outlined, were really had been fully accounted in the decision making and in the kind of advice people are giving, because these are difficult things to estimate. Nobody should think that these decisions are very easy, even the estimate. So what I have been trying to do is publicize the costs of the economics, and to propagate the alternatives. And I get the feeling that government is beginning to think along those lines.
Now, what are those alternatives, Dr. Virmani? If you can give us 2 or 3 examples of those alternatives you are thinking of.
Yeah. So the question is to devise something, and I'll throw out. I mean, though I've written logically about it, but
Yeah.
remembering it will be a little random. But let me tell you. Let me start with how the in a general sense, we have to understand that much of this stuff came to India through international travel. Whether it's Indians coming back, or foreigners traveling to India, and so on, back and forth. So the first most important thing is that I think we have to completely ban international travel for a considerable period. I would say at this time the government should announce that up to June 31st there will be no international travel, except for maybe compassionate stuff and all, where people want to get home, which are special arrangements which can be made. The second thing is this. Sorry, I should give you the philosophy. The basic philosophy, of course, is to what has been called social distancing, though I prefer to call it socio-spatial distancing. So,
Right.
but it starts with the international travel. That's why I started. After that, the next most important is this section 144. I think that will have to continue for quite some time. That no gatherings of more than 4 people, 4 or more people, rather more than 4 people, in any place, whether it's a religious place or anything. So that is definitely, we know that these two things have been causative factors in India. The third one is the wearing of masks. I think a lot of people got misled in the beginning because of these scare stories from USA about how all kinds of people were going in for the best masks, the N95, and there were not enough masks for doctors and so on. But what they forget is there are many simple masks which are available and can be made at home. So what I have been propagating for the last 2-3 weeks is that the science tells us that even though we are in direct contact, like a doctor is with an infected patient, a simple mask does not help, but it helps in containing the spread. That is the most important thing. So as responsible people, because I don't know for 100% sure whether I have COVID or not, I must wear a mask outside. All of us, it should be made compulsory to wear a mask outside the home. So that is the third thing. And the fourth is that kind of social distancing norms must be enforced very, very forcefully. Now, given that, I believe that there are two dimensions on which we have to start opening up production and transport of agriculture, of manufacturing and mining, but given these strict new conditions, that everybody in a factory or workplace must be wearing a mask while they are working, and that there will be no social mingling while on work. Now, when you're sitting at your own decks and working, that is okay, but no coffee machine kind of things without a mask, etc. So those social distancing norms will have to be carefully spelled out, the mask policy, etc., and a whole number of things. Well, one more I want to mention, what has been said, that perhaps a few districts which are badly affected and which could have that kind of situation, which the scare stories we've heard from USA, etc., of overload of hospitals. I think in those districts, very consciously, one could perhaps continue the lockdown policy for some more time. But by and large, the presumption should be that we will have these alternative, very strict rules and even legal what do you call it, penalties, and allow an opening of the production system. One more thing sorry, I want to mention is that I think we have to be very strict on in terms of self quarantine. There are basically three ways of quarantining: home quarantine, special facilities, and hospitals. People who are so sick that they need to go to the hospital will go, but these other
Sure.
two aspects I think we have to focus very carefully on. And in the home case, I think two things which have worked historically. One, of course, is the new one about a mobile app. If somebody is quarantined, they must check in on, or they can be checked and monitored on a mobile app. But I think if people are irresponsible, we should even think of putting bands. There are GPS bands which can be put on the ankle or the wrist, which give an alarm when a person goes out of the home. So if necessary, and people who can afford it could perhaps even be charged for these kind of bands. But I think definitely even buying these somewhat expensive bands and putting them on people in home quarantine would be much cheaper than the loss of GDP which is happening in the lockdown.
Sir, when there are a lot of questions about India's figures in terms of those infected, the death rate, etc., what is your sense? There are certain mathematical models say India's death rate should be much higher. What's your take on this?
Right. So a little bit I want to tell, because this is important for the general public. Most modelers are looking at these old curves like S curve and bell curve and things which from past epidemics. Believe me, I have looked very carefully at 150 countries. Whenever I try to fit any of these conventional models, I don't find more than 5 countries which fit a model. So I can't estimate these parameters. So what these modelers are doing is they are just assuming parameters from old epidemics and shoving them in. I can tell you honestly that I have tried very hard. I can't get these parameters out of the actual data. So what is the way to go? What I have done is to make some very simple statistical calculations on this set of countries for which we have data. So for example, the latest data shows me that the mean ratio of deaths to cases is about 2.7%. 2.7, I think it's per thousand of population. I forget the exact, but I can check it. But the Indian one right now is exactly the same as the average. So I think there's no reason to believe that the death rate is understated or overstated. As far as the cases per thousand population is concerned, India is currently running well below the average. So now, whether this is due to the early precautions, it could be partly, let's say, due to the early precautions we took. For example, we banned visas on 3rd April, and then early March we stopped the international travel and so on. And partly could be the lack of testing or lower amount of testing. So I think both these factors probably play a role in the number of cases per unit of population. Now, I would add one or two more things which are more speculative. I have no evidence of this, but I think the ratio of because our rural population is very high, something like 70%. We have a little bit of evidence from the USA that the very rural states have had less cases. Oklahoma and President Clinton's state, what's it called? The capital is Little Rock. Anyway, so that could be another factor, that it's really in concentrations, urban concentrations, where the spread is higher. You see that in New York. So the contrasts in the US which you see are basically between the very urbanized areas and the states which are more rural. So that could be another transitional step to focus whatever remaining lockdowns you want to maintain in very dense cities, and start freeing up the rural, semi-rural, and other areas, but with all the precautions which I have mentioned.
Like you said very rightly about the US, if you look at the hotspots that currently are trending in India, they're all urban conglomerations, Indore, Mumbai, Pune, Delhi, and maybe one or two more cities. So
And
you may be
they're
right on that.
urbanized, very urbanized kind of
Very
states.
urbanized. That's right. So you may be completely right on that. But one final question, Dr. Virmani, about the economy itself. I mean, post all the lockdown and all the precautions that we take up to 30th June, international travel being banned and all that, how do you see the larger picture of the world economy? Are we going to get into the state of economy, the global economy, and then the Indian economy of what we witnessed in 2008-9, or it's too early to say?
It's pretty clear that the after the lockdown is lifted, the crisis situation in India and in most countries of the world is going to remain for some time, and a lot of analysts are focusing on two things. One is in terms of the peaking of the infection rate, the spread of infection, and second is some kind of a cure, or not exactly a cure, a vaccine, or something like that, which will remove the excessive fear. Every every illness or every communicable disease has a death rate, but what has really frightened everybody is that right now there's nothing much you can do about this. You just, it's too random. There's no hope of a specific thing. So both in India and abroad, the focus in that. So till that there is some reassurance on that, I think there is going to be a pretty strong negative effect of this whole thing on particularly the what I call the contact sectors. Like contact where there's inherent contact, like you're traveling on a plane or a bus, or even in a restaurant where you're sitting with everybody. So in these kind of entertainment, where there are a number of people, I think these sectors are going to be heavily depressed till that happens, whether it's in India or abroad. But besides that, even the non-essential commodities and the non-contact sectors, there is a danger that, uh, I mean, I can tell you an interesting fact. In India, it's about 36% is, I estimated, is the essential commodities which are exempt from lockdown, and about 15 to 20% are those contact sectors. The rest, about 50%, is the rest of the economy. So this whole atmosphere of fear and lockdowns and crisis in this industry certainly will affect the rest of the economy also.
Right. So I think responsible social behavior and also graded steps to combat this pandemic, which has no cure at the moment, clear cure, looks like the way forward as far as India is concerned. And of course, India has to look at the world also. But thank you very much for your time, Dr. Virmani, and very insightful comments and perspectives that you offered to our viewers here. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you in some weeks again. Maybe we'll have another conversation. This is all we have on Talking Point this week. But don't forget to like us on our various social media handles, and of course, keep sending feedback on our website and other social media handles.